Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to episode number 5 of the Multi-Cloud Expedition. We've got a fantastic show today that I've got a number of guest speakers, subject matter experts, as well as industry experts. So before we get started, though, always like to recap what the purpose of the series is, which is to uncover the challenges of operating in a multi-cloud environment, and then what technology capabilities can help you deliver real business results. So let's start with that level set of how we define the multi-cloud. So when it comes to the multi-cloud environment, you're looking at your entire IT infrastructure, everything beginning with over on the left, the private or on-premises cloud, through all the different hyperscalers, as well as and including sovereign clouds, out towards managed service providers, entirely out to the edge. And what we found when we ask our customers with regards to if they're operating in that environment, 87% of them were actually operating in a multi-cloud environment. So this is no doubt the environment we'll all be operating in for the foreseeable future. So where are customers and how do we define, how does VMware define this cloud journey? It really begins with they started in kind of a cloud first mentality. And you'll see there right over on the left, customers started out and they began looking at applications and how they could develop quickly native applications. And they went on that cloud first swing up. And they did develop a lot of great applications, quick time to value. However, as they kind of looked at governance, security, development, they found that they were descending into kind of a cloud chaos. And this was, again, a customer described term from our survey. They said, we've got all these different cloud properties. How do we govern them? How do we get through that? And so that's where this series comes in, right? Is to figure out, and we can advance to the next visual, how VMware cross-cloud services can help our customers get to a cloud smart environment, making sure that the right app goes into the right cloud. So with that, let's do a quick recap of the last episode. So as I mentioned, we're on episode number 5. The multi-cloud is full of challenges. The challenges range everything from how do you get developers to be able to develop faster, whether it be in on-prem kind of traditional application development environments or out to native development environments with Kubernetes in the cloud or even on-prem with Kubernetes. So we tackled that in episode number 1. Episode number 2 was looking at the fundamentals of cost, observability, and security in the multi-cloud. Numerous properties, that entire IT architecture that I put up there just a few minutes ago, looking at how do you tackle that and how do you look at the cost of it, as well as observe what's going on with the applications, and then security. Security is a huge topic. And so number 3 went deeper into security, and we looked at strategies for governing those clouds, as well as additional network security. And then continuing on in episode number 4, we went deeper into network security. How do you decrease the blast radius? Also, we brought in a guest speaker, the guest speaker, Kevin Jackson, another industry expert, who came in and gave us his perspective on the multi-cloud. And we wrapped up with how do you recover if the worst should happen and there is a ransomware attack. So those were episode recaps from 1 through 4. They're all available on demand, and you are welcome to check those out. And I hope you do. You can hit that QR code and you'd go ahead and see them. All right. Now, what are we going to cover today? We've been working hard to bring you a great show. And so we have a fantastic topic, which is mergers and acquisitions. Because the second you merge or you acquire a company, you're most likely expanding that multi-cloud environment. So today we're going to have an expert from Deloitte. Joost is going to be joining us in a minute. But then, well, we'll bring him in right now. All right. Joost, how are you doing? Welcome to the program.
I'm great, Alexander. Please finish your thought if you had something else.
No, I was going to give a quick update on the a quick roll of the agenda for today, but this is even better. We're going to jump right into the meat of this, Joost, and welcome to the program. Tell us a little bit about your role at Deloitte and your background.
Yeah, well, first, thanks for having me. I think this is a wonderful way of engaging your audience through these live links. So thanks for having me. I lead Deloitte's M&A practice for high-tech media and telecom industry clients. I've been doing M&A for more than 20 years. Maybe quick two additions. One, you'll see my name and you hear my accent. I didn't grow up here in the U.S. You asked me, how do I pronounce your name in our pre-chats, and it's Joost. I grew up in the Netherlands. I started out with Philips Electronics in corporate strategy, and I moved on to Siemens, and that's in the 90s, and lived the exciting days of the 90s before I stepped into M&A about 25 years ago. One other comment I wanted to make is honored to be here, but also share best practices. This is teamwork, so this is not so much about me. What I'll tell and share today is much what we have built up over the many decades. Last year, we won the M&A Advisor Award for the largest deal, the largest divestiture, as well as the largest cross-functional deal of the year. There's a lot of people around me, behind me, in our practice that every day work with organizations and technologies like VMware to make the dream happen of M&A. So happy to share some of that. And so, Alexander, let's get into it. What you have on your mind.
You know, it's fantastic to prep with you and get the perspective that you have, right? You've got the very broad perspective of M&A, whereas, of course, we provide capabilities, we being VMware, in order to help speed that M&A. But your framework kind of is perfect for the beginning of this show because it starts at the highest level. And you said in our when we were kind of pre-briefing, it's important to have a North Star. So maybe tell us a little bit about what does that North Star mean when it comes to M&A?
Yeah, and I think it's wonderful you start there, because one of the biggest challenges, arguably, of M&A or doing a merger and acquisition, or as well as a divestiture, is that and it doesn't matter if you're a finance or IT professional or CEO or somewhere in the boat, is you have too many demands. There's customer demands, there's employee demands, there's expectations financially, there's expectations strategically, technology, how to keep it all safe. And everything is in a compressed time frame. It's almost like you do a startup in a ridiculous short period of time. And so having a North Star is really important, because it's really easy to lose line of sight to what matters. And the North Star, obviously, well, to me, obviously, should be the investment thesis. Why are you doing the deal? You're doing the deal for a reason, either to get access to a market, to enable a new product, to extend a product portfolio, to accelerate your technology roadmap, to maybe change your business model, your monetization model. And so you do this for a reason. And understanding the investment thesis and the value drivers of those investment thesis is really important to keep in mind through that entire journey of M&A, because there will be every day, every moment of the day in that process, there will be somebody asking for attention that in itself is good, but may or may not be aligned with the investment thesis.
Yeah, and I think that is, as you mentioned, the demands of that entire integration process, of all the different processes that have to go on leading up to it, will no doubt pull in different directions. But always having that North Star is super important, right? And it's that investment thesis that needs to be realized as quickly as possible. In that, when you're looking at, all right, from the start to the finish, there's a life cycle there in M&A. What are the stages of that life cycle?
Yeah, broadly speaking, there are 5 phases in every deal. The first one is, we call it M&A strategy. It's the make or buy decision, or sell, right? If you have a business that doesn't add any more to the core value and your mission of your company. And once you make that decision to do a transaction, then the second phase is, when you're on the buy side, is target screening. It's like you make a long list and a short list, trying to find the right target company that fits that need to meet your financial and strategic objectives. The third phase, and this is typically all done with like a few people, right? And then the third phase, you get a few more people involved, but still very small, is diligence. So due diligence tends to focus on financial diligence, tax diligence, so understand financial risk, the history, but also the future projections. With commercial diligence, is this the right target, the right product set, the right customer set, market access? But technology actually plays an important role in that. We call it operational diligence, and a lot of that is about understanding the scalability. Well, initially, what is the infrastructure of the target? Is it scalable? How does it map to our infrastructure? What set of applications, core applications, do they have? What is business? What's IT core applications? What is the cybersecurity situation? And that's the diligence phase. That's all focused on can we agree to the right price and the right target to get the deal done. Once you have the deal, you get what we call day zero. That's the moment of announce. Not unimportant. We wrote a book about it called The Synergy Solution. One of the things we found is that a lot of times deals get sort of announced quickly with a memo, but actually that's a moment that investors and customers, as well as employees, really start to pay attention because it's the first time they hear about it. And they start to think, is this a good thing or a bad thing for me? So it's a really important moment at day one. Day zero. Then you go from day zero to day one, which is the period from announce to close. Sometimes that's really short. Sometimes day zero, day one for very small deals, tech and tele deals can be the same. Typically, larger deals you have to file for regulatory approval, can be short, can be long, depending on the regulatory institutions and jurisdictions you have to deal with. And that period, announce to close, is a great opportunity to do some additional discovery to the extent permissible and feasible with both parties. That leads to day one. Day one is the moment of close. That is actually the first moment you operate parent and target as one. Operate as in you're legally and fiduciary one company, same set of stakeholders, shareholders, etc. But you're not integrated yet, right? You're still separate from an operational standpoint and probably from contractual relationships with customers and vendors, etc. And then you go from day one to day two, which is the moment, so from close to post-close integration. And that is at some point a moment when you say, I think we have integrated this business in a way that we can operate the end state, that we can enable the value that we had in mind. So these 5 stages: make or buy, target screening, diligence. Is this really the target we want to go forward with for the right price? That leads to announce to close, additional diligence or additional discovery, and then close to post-close integration.
Mm-hmm. And so as you went through those different stages, you talked about kind of what begins as a small group, right? And then the group gets a little bit bigger each step of the way. And you also dropped in there a couple of things that I wanted to ask you more about. We've got a lot of our audience, of course, are practitioners in the multi-cloud, practitioners in infrastructure. So maybe as they go along, or what are some of the challenges that you've seen or they could expect as you go through those different phases? For IT, I should say.
Yeah, it's a great question, Alexander. So for IT professionals and leaders that get involved in these M&A situations, typically the first moment is sort of in that diligence phase, and it's a handful of people at most. Don't forget, this is still very much done, as we call it, under wraps. It's secret. People are on NDA. The deal may or may not happen. It's all pre-announced. And nobody wants to have this news leaked or somebody understand that there's this secret project going. So typically a few IT people get involved with the assignment to help us understand the risks. And the risks focus on cyber risk. So what's the cyber risk profile of the company, as well as what's the infrastructure, the application layers, etc. of this target company, so that we understand how they operate. And then the second question is, can you start to translate that into some hypothesis about what will it take to integrate this company? How scalable is their infrastructure? Can we keep this target running on their own infrastructure for a while? Or is this oh no, this needs to be integrated immediately, or because of the investment thesis needs to be integrated immediately. We want to sell together, we want to operate together. And what will that be? One-time cost, run rate cost, timing. So initial thinking about the integration timeline. Those are typically the two biggest questions. It's a few people. The challenge there is it's short. You don't really have access to perfect information. And actually, VMware, our professionals think that's really great that VMware is around, because information in VMware. One of the solutions that VMware has is give clear information, enables the target to provide clear information to the buyer about, hey, this is my data center infrastructure, this is my cloud infrastructure, this is in terms of power and compute what I have or what I need to operate the business as is. And that's really what you're after in that phase.
Yeah, I think that first point you made, very interesting, because we hear over and over again that your first point was about security, needing to understand the security posture. So even at that early stage, the parent company wants to know, hey, what are we getting into here, right? And I almost think of an analogy like if you were going to go buy a physical property, right, that had a lot of IP, a lot of, let's say, assets. You'd probably want to make sure, hey, are the doors locked? Are there security guards? Like, are they following the basic governance processes of a company that we want to acquire? So from that standpoint, kind of very interesting that it surfaces so early in the process.
It does. It's one of the changes that has come up, obviously, or increasingly, right? And it's not overnight, but the cyber risk is really on the forefront of M&A and in the C-suite, when people start thinking or companies start thinking about buying other companies, what does that do to our risk profile?
Mm-hmm. Okay, then looks like the lights might have gone out on you. I don't know if that was just me.
Okay.
That happens to me all the time at our office sometimes when there aren't very many people in the office. So one of the next things that we wanted to tackle was you've got many years of experience in mergers and acquisitions. What are you seeing that's different today than 1 year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago? You picked the right time frame. How have things changed in M&A?
Yeah, I'll highlight 4 or 5 items that have changed. The first one that comes to mind, probably the most important one that comes to mind, is the need for speed, and the expectations about speed. When I started operating in M&A, it felt like M&A was a sequential process, and it sounds a little bit like sequential in terms of the phases. But if you think about the from announce to close and post close, that used to be a pretty sequential set of activities. Announce to close, just keep day one, keep the business running. Make sure that nothing falls between the cracks. Post close, we'll start thinking about integration, and integration, has a set of sub activities. And then post integration, there's another phase, arguably sort of a day 3 phase, which is the transformation. And the transformation is really like the optimization. So first integrate and then transform. That has completely changed. The expectations are that you transform while you transact. So when you start looking at a deal, you immediately, even in diligence, you start thinking about your envision. What are we together are going to do better? Not so much as in like, hey, I add your business to my business, and that sounds great, and maybe we sell a little bit more into the market. No. Fundamentally change the business, and the companies that do that well, that take that opportunity, that window of change during a deal, really thrive and outpace the competition. The companies that do not do that still are in this sequential mode, tend to miss out on market opportunities, and sometimes detrimentally so. Oftentimes I have conversations with executives, CIO, CEO, CFOs, chief revenue officers. What happened in this deal? Why did it or did it not work out? And if it didn't work out, it tends to be one of the 2 reasons that I hear most is, one, we forgot to keep line of sight to the investment thesis. We just got lost in the forest. We did a lot of things. Our teams got so busy. They got so busy. We just forgot what was really important. The second theme that I hear is we were just not fast enough. We should have done this a lot faster. We took way too long to integrate this company and then optimize the company, get the cost out, enable the revenue synergies. We just took too long. And so the speed is really the most important thing that has changed.
Yeah, speed, the term that I always like to use, I mean, they mean the same thing, but it's time to value. And if I piece together a couple of items that you mentioned in particular at the beginning, even in that diligence phase, when they're looking at the first security you mentioned, but then from an infrastructure standpoint, the question comes up like, well, can this be done, or in what time period can we unite or merge these two companies so as to, of course, realize that investment thesis, right? So it goes back to, here's all this, could be huge companies. Obviously, usually those ones are the more difficult, no doubt, I would imagine, to integrate. And then how fast can you do it? Because how fast determines whether or not that investment thesis, at least a key component of it, gets realized.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, maybe to highlight, we survey every year, right? Like many of our peers do as well. In the market, this year, 90% of corporate M&A and 94% of financial buyers thought that transformation was the key to realizing that value of a deal. That is up from 63% just a year before, and even so, it even surprises us how fast this is going. The notion of when you start thinking about a deal, what are you actually changing fundamentally about your deal? And obviously, it's about by the way, the digitization. Another thing that has changed is the digitization and the cloudification, right? Which is what very much is core to VMware, which enables the speed. So luckily, it's not just that the needs in the market have changed. Customers expect more, faster integration of product roadmaps. Financial investors expect faster road to value. But luckily, also, the technology has moved on. And so you can do things faster. And maybe, Alexander, if you allow me, we're talking about the integrations, but actually one of the things that I think also, and back to VMware and the cloudification, that is really helping is actually in divestitures. So when a company starts to think about selling a business that at some point was strategic, but at some, world has moved on, maybe it became sort of a cash cow, it's not the high growth element anymore in the portfolio, or maybe another company thinks that they can make more money with it. Those divestitures tend to be painful because you have to separate and then you have to either integrate or stand up. The cloudification, right? The fact that you live in multi-cloud environment has enabled that to go a lot faster. The discovery of where is the data and where does it live? The discovery of what's your app infrastructure and how is it hosted? Either on-prem, in a cloud, in multiple places. The application stand-up also has gone a lot faster. So you can invest quicker in these transformations and think about a sort of a hosted environment to make that a really seamless transition from the old parent to what either becomes a new standalone company or an integrated new parent. So it's not just on the buy side where we see the need for speed, but also the ability to go faster. It's certainly and sometimes even more visible on the separations that we're involved in.
Yeah, you just brought it up to like a bigger life cycle, which is, right, there's the mergers and acquisitions side, but then there's the divestiture side and the complexity if you are acquiring somebody else's divestiture, right? If it's just part of it, for example. But key to all that, right, is having some, I'd say the capabilities to take and separate data, workloads, et cetera, and run them where they need to be run that's most cost effective, or that's part of and it probably tied to cost effective part of that acquiring company, as an example. You may have opened the door to a whole nother episode on just divestitures and how data segmentation in the multi-cloud can be achieved. So with that, I want to say thank you so much, because you brought us from keep in mind that, North Star investment thesis at all times, because that is really what's driving the deal. Driving that as fast as possible, right? Time to value is super important to realize that investment thesis. And then you even put a couple plugs in for VMware. Very much appreciate that for our capabilities, which is what we're going to do now. We're actually going to transition here in a second, and we're going to dive into some of those capabilities that help speed that time to value. So with that, Joost, thank you so much. Pleasure talking to you beforehand as well as right now on the show. Tremendous value you've brought to the show and to our audience. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Alexander. Thanks for having me. Good luck with the rest of the show.
Absolutely. Take care. Okay, so as we mentioned, thank you again, Joost. And now we're going to go down from that investment thesis and continue to walk all the way down to looking at some of the capabilities on day 0, as well as on day 1, specific to employees and employee capabilities and onboarding. So with that, I want to welcome our subject matter expert, Jack Madden, to the show.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, Jack, take a moment to introduce yourself and tell us about your role.
Yeah, so I am on the product marketing team for the VMware EUC business unit. We do the VMware Horizon is our well-known desktop virtualization product, and Workspace ONE UEM is our well-known endpoint management product. But of course, we'll be talking about even more security and experience things we do. And I've been following this EUC space, beginning with the mobility side. About 12 or 13 years now. So I really enjoy talking about that.
All right. And so, as Yost just mentioned, we've got the different stages of mergers and acquisitions, and you and I are going to focus specifically on the day zero and day one. So, if we begin kind of with the day zero, maybe share what are some of the challenges in that day zero when it comes to end user experience. And actually, Shannon, if you want to pause on that, because that's day one. So, we're a little bit early on that. In case anybody didn't know, this is a live show. And so it's not pre-recorded, which also is a cue for me to remind the audience that since it is live, please, by all means, comment on the show. You are welcome to ask questions because both Jack and our next speaker, Puneet, both subject matter experts, will collect those questions as we're going through the information, and we'll have a Q&A period at the end. So that was a perfect cue for me to remind the audience that we are broadcasting live. And so put your questions in there. We'll get them answered at the end of the program. All right, day zero, back to day zero. We're not to day one yet. We got to first, do that process of it's been announced. And now what's the challenges that we tend to see in that day zero environment?
Yeah, well, as Joost mentioned, there are often very small teams working even prior to day zero. But once that day zero happens, there's going to be these very small teams working on obviously very sensitive, very highly regulated materials going back and forth between the two organizations. Now, of course, they're off-the-shelf, data room, data clean room products out there. But one of our products that people often use, to provide an extra layer of security and controls around really any types of applications, but it's especially suited for this use case, is of course VMware Horizon. Where we put the customer may put that clean room software onto a virtual desktop and provide that access out from one organization to another, and of course. All the benefits of VDI, as we'll see in the demo, it's no local data on the endpoint, all of the control of what goes in and out of that virtual desktop, all of the auditability. So it really provides that tightly encapsulated environment to do all of that clean room activity.
Yeah, so this is the day zero. It's been announced. Then all of a sudden, IT gets a call. Hey, we need to have this secure environment, right, where we can exchange documents, where it can be governed, right, where we might have to add new people daily or subtract them from the process. And we need a capability to do that. And I think that's the demo you're going to show us first and if there's anything else you want to set up for that.
Yeah, this is this is for people that may not be familiar with the solution. This is a little bit of the VDI 101 session, but let's go ahead and roll the demo.
Okay.
You can see here that we have a physical device, in this case a Mac, which in an M&A scenario would be owned and managed by the target company. Now, we're going to click and open the virtual desktop from VMware Horizon. This is Workspace ONE Intelligent Hub that is being used to launch the Horizon client. We'll talk more about Hub in a later demo. Now, much of the audience is familiar with VDI, but for those that aren't, this desktop is a VM that's running in a data center. The BLAST protocol is streaming down the video and audio and relaying the keyboard and mouse inputs back up. There's much more that makes the experience very rich, but for now, note that this is where the IT teams supporting transition could add many types of data loss prevention controls. These can range all the way from blocking copy and paste, local drive mapping, and printing, up to watermarking, keylogger prevention, and in the Windows and Mac clients, blocking screen capture.
So,
Yeah,
it is some VDI 101 right there. But on the other side, people, it's important to recognize that it's a great capability. It's a technology capability, right? To speed that integration team to be able to do their work, right? And
yeah. And of course, we enable that, with the, deploy it, of course, on any cloud, or on-prem. And of course, we enabled, an absolutely great experience. Like if you're doing video meetings within that secure environment, we have all those capabilities to support that rich experience.
And you're keeping at the same time, when there's certain materials or information that needs to be shared, that desktop that gets spun up, right? So we got to kind of walk through it maybe for just for context. I'm part of the I'm the in the target company, right? And I've got my normal target company laptop. This is day 0, so there's no integration yet, but I need to participate on systems that are part of the parent company. And so just like, right, within a few seconds, honestly, maybe the infrastructure has to be set up first, but you spin up that desktop, it's going to have the ability to access all the files necessary and also provide some protections. And maybe what are some of the protections in that VDI environment that can be enabled?
Yeah, well, like I mentioned, there's the DLP capabilities and bringing things in and out of the desktop that were mentioned in the demo. But on top of this, as you can imagine, all of the access, auditing, and logging, even things like session recording or doing a forensic hold on that desktop if you are in a situation where you need something like that. And, of course, everything with what that desktop is able to access in the parent company environment using Zero Trust best practices, that would, of course, be very tightly controlled as well.
Mm-hmm. And that means, in a very common term, no data on the device of that target employee from that parent company, because it's all spun up on demand there.
Absolutely.
All right. Now we can switch over. Shannon, you can put the visual up there, because so day 0, now we are to the completed date of the acquisition, and day 1 begins. And this is, a huge lift when it comes to onboarding the employees of the target company to the parent company. So Jack, maybe walk us through some of these different challenges and what some considerations IT can think ahead on.
Yeah, well, first it's, on day 1, all those employees are waking up and sitting down at their laptops or desktops for the first time. They're going to have all sorts of onboarding resources and questions, and that they're going to need to have a central place to find. And then, of course, a little bit later, once they say, okay, I need to log into the HR application for the first time, and maybe as the day goes on, it's okay to log into this training application or whatever. Even finding and logging in to these applications is a challenge in its own right. I think at VMware, we're used to using the app catalog experience in Workspace ONE Intelligent Hub, and sometimes we may take it for granted when we, if you think about other organizations that may have app access all over the place, and maybe there's a bookmark here or a bookmark there, and you use this method to access this app and this method to access another. On day 1, for all of those employees, of course, finding all of those apps, you can't have all of those newly onboarded employees poking around everywhere in the entire environment trying to find everything. They'll be frustrated, and you might not want them, everywhere in the environment quite yet. So providing that app catalog experience is a huge part of that. And that as well, that speaks to the security infrastructure and processes as well, because day 1, you're not going to want to open up your whole environment and your whole network and say, hey, everybody, here's, thousands of new people on our network. That would be, quite a challenge. You may have different standard operating environments, or you might have different ways that you do compliance that you need to even out. And then lastly, doing all of this with creating a good impression and a positive experience with the end users. The users, they've been in some town halls, they've been reading about things in the news, but this is one of the very first one-on-one touch points that they have. So it's an important place to make a good first impression.
And it's amazing how important IT is when it comes to this integration process. And the example you and I talked about before is we'll go back to Yoast a bit. And let's say that one of the investment thesis of a parent company is we want to access new markets through a sales team that we're going to, as we acquire the new company. And so to access those new markets and that sales team, they need to have the information, the target company employees to sell those other products, right? So the question that comes to IT is, how do you get those onboarded sales team, that face of the company, to be able to talk to the customer as quickly as possible with that new material? And Workspace ONE, right? Hub, all of these capabilities can point them in that right direction and then share that information. Now, of course, there's the whole onboarding enablement training, right? But at least from day one, they'd be able to have access to that type of information.
Again, yeah, exactly. And this Intelligent Hub application that we're talking about, this is a native or web app that can be run on the target company's laptops or devices, mobile devices. That maybe these devices are managed by the target company, and so this is the parent company extending access with this application. And now the key part is that, again, you don't have to transfer management of all those devices on day one, because migrating devices from one management platform to another is pretty challenging. And as I mentioned, you're not going to put all of those devices on your network, and nor are you going to have to figure out the logistics of getting, potentially thousands of laptops to arrive on people's doorsteps in the offices on day one as well. That's that's a huge cost there. And so I'll mention that, with that in mind, we have, specific, licensing offerings to specifically around this Intelligent Hub on devices that are managed, by another management platform. And we have some stats that's actually, Alexander, your team shared with us from our internal research of just how much that savings of not buying those laptops on day one is important. Reading the stat here, for a 4,000 person company, assuming $1,750 per laptop, that's like a $7 million expense, capex right at day one that you can avoid and just keep things maybe even on your existing refresh schedule.
Yeah. So not only a cost savings there, but also faster time to value to get the employees the apps they need to do their job, or the information, their sales team, in order to do their job faster. So let's go ahead and take a look at these capabilities in the next demo.
Here we see Workspace ONE and Intelligent Hub getting configured. Once it's open, the first thing we see is the Custom Home tab, which shows a web view. This can be configured using secure per-app connectivity back to resources that are only accessible on the corporate network, like an intranet page. Next, there's the Favorites tab, which is completely configurable by the user. Then we go into the Apps tab. Let's pause the demo to learn more. This app catalog is configurable by role, so in an NMA scenario, for example, IT could showcase apps and links for onboarding for the whole target organization, and then for specific roles, they can showcase specific apps, like showing CRM for sales. Next up is the For You tab. IT can send corporate communications and actionable notifications. This also integrates with the native notification framework on a device. Here, we see a sample question about device performance. Then on the console side, we can use role-based access control to, for example, let HR admins send messages to specific groups. In addition, all this data goes into the same data lake as everything else that comes into Workspace ONE. It can be analyzed, correlated with other events, and even used to trigger automations. Going back to the device, on the Self-Service tab, IT can provide customized resources, such as connections to the help desk, remote support, or self-service tasks like password reset. A user can also enroll their mobile device to get access to email and much more. Most of our audience has seen this workflow many times, but today we will highlight two things. First, there are many ways we emphasize privacy on BYO devices. Second, once everything is configured, we see how the Intelligent Hub app provides the same great experience on mobile that we saw on the desktop.
Yeah, I think being able to onboard those, the target company employees, so they've got the same experience on mobile as well as on desktops, super valuable, as well as being able to give that application level access, depending on the, kind of keeping in mind the zero trust principles. Anything else you wanted to add about the demo?
Yeah, I just can't emphasize enough the day one being able to figure out where to find everything, how to get your email on your phone, where to go to sign up, for HR benefits, all these questions and concerns that can be, put in this nice, easily consumable format. And again, this is across all devices. And you mentioned also the connectivity to resources that may be behind the firewall, and that's another thing that we talk about a lot as well, is that thinking about providing all this access across organizations really aligns with zero trust principles. So if you're, like I've said several times, you're not going to let an entirely new laptop run rampant in your network. You're going to have that specific access, after that user has authenticated to a very specific resource. So almost if an organization has a mature and robust understanding or approach to zero trust, the more they do that, the easier this process will be as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, Jack, thank you very much. Don't go too far, because we'll bring you back for Q&A at the end, but very much appreciate you giving us the update on end user computing capabilities from day 0 to day 1 and beyond. So with that, we'll see you a little bit later in the show, and we're going to switch from end user computing to infrastructure as it relates to a multi-cloud world and as it relates to mergers and acquisitions. And I'd like to welcome another expert from VMware, Puneet. Puneet, welcome to the show, and give us a quick background and intro on your role. You might be muted, Puneet. Sorry.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me?
No worries. I can hear you loud and clear now. Go for it.
Thanks for having me. Yep, my name is Puneet Chawla. I'm a senior technologist at VMware. I've been with the company for over 7 years, and prior to this, I was with EMC building the first enterprise hybrid cloud. So been with the family for over 10 years, helping customer with their multi-cloud and hybrid cloud journey from networking and security aspect. Okay,
awesome. All right. When it comes to infrastructure, right? IT team gets the call. They say, hey, here M&A, some form of an announcement. What are some of the challenges that they're going to face?
Yeah, great question. So the first thing, as you can imagine, is really the discovery phase. They don't know nothing from the infrastructure point of view about the company, and really getting a scoping of how many sites the target customer or target company has, how many vCenters, and not only that, then we dig a little bit deeper, get into the applications posture. How many applications do we have? What are the crown jewel applications that are very important for the business and maybe need to be migrated first? and what are the flows of these applications, the dependencies to common services. All these questions need to be answered, and other things are utilization. If we were to do a migration, we need to know these application or the whole infrastructure, what are they utilizing in terms of CPU, memory, and storage, so we can get the correct resources on the target side, on the other side. And once we get the lay of the land, the other important questions need to be answered are governance, who has access to these applications, how does the security posture look like for these. So really it starts with the discovery phase.
And that aligns exactly to what Yost said right at the beginning is IT gets the call, and maybe depending on how early it is in the process, the discovery might just begin with, hey, can the infrastructures combine to realize that investment thesis? And so that's kind of step one, aligned very well. Okay, so now there's some discovery. And actually, when you and I talked about this previously, the combined with discovery is also assessment, right? And assessment is the assessment of the security, which again, interesting. That was one that Yost highlighted as being very important. We're, for the purposes of today, because we're not going to have sufficient time to get into it, we're not going to cover the assessment, but the security of the infrastructure is probably enough for a whole nother episode. So we'll kind of put that one over here for a future episode. But tell us what comes now. We've done some discovery. What are the next two stages?
So we have a demo that will show a little bit about the discovery piece also. We'll talk about, what are how the solutions can help you find answers to these questions, and even a little bit in the assessment side in terms of return of interest or total cost of ownership, how that looks like from current side to if we were to migrate. So that could be something we can look into next. Alexander, you want to like to look at the demo
we can,
and how?
As I kind of look at this, I'm just thinking there's discovery, and then that's kind of that day zero or prior, right? And then planning and setup is that still kind of day zero, and then day one becomes the execution. You've got a great demo though that's going to show us a lot about how an organization can discover, right? A parent company can discover what's going on inside of a target company. And so let's go ahead and let's roll that demo.
From VMware Cloud Services portal, we can launch VMware ARIA Migration Services. Here in VMware ARIA Hub dashboard, we can see all our managed accounts, on-premises sites or VMC sites, or even native public clouds. Within a single dashboard, we can see resources consumption and the trends. Snapshot of all the applications, their security vulnerabilities, governance, and cost of these resources. All this level of information is very critical to make the right decision before any migration efforts. In ARIA Migration Services, we can gather relevant information for migration and creating assessment reports. Here we're showing information of the target companies whose resources needs to be migrated. And we can gather this information from a live environment or from offline data. It's critical to have current usage data in order to plan a better migration. Information like total number of virtual machines and applications, snapshot of your current utilization, therefore total CPUs, memories, and storage usage. Next step is the assessment report, where we're going to gather information that can answer questions like, should we migrate all applications at once or migrate them in waves? What are the dependencies and cost implications of these applications? While creating this assessment report, we've automatically grouped all the applications as per their storage uses, and this can be changed per CPU or memory usage. We can learn about the dependencies of an application in terms of what other applications they are talking to. So we may be able to plan to to migrate them in a group all together at once. We can also see all the workloads that make up an application. And if we plan to migrate application in waves, this report is very useful, as we can get the resources information for just an application and flexibility to include or exclude the dependent workloads. Let's look at a pre-created migration assessment report for all instances of a target company. In the report calculator, we can modify VMC on AWS subscription terms, type of host, and even billing types. And instantly, it shows me the potential cost saving to move to VMC on AWS. As we already have the information on current resources we will need and how many VMC on AWS hosts will require to run those workloads. Remember, in VMC on AWS public cloud, you never have to pay per instance, instead per host. So you can utilize the host for its maximum capacity for the maximum savings. This report also provides the resources snapshot per application and can be easily exported.
Puneet, you just made that look easy, but that is not easy. I guess that's what we do here at VMware, right? Is we take these complex operational challenges for infrastructure, and then we operationalize them so that they can achieve that, the business goal. In this case, it would be the business goal of discovery, planning, and migration, right? In support of that investment thesis. But, tell us a little bit more about, that the visual is awesome of ARIA Hub and showing all those different workloads. Tell us a little bit more about what we saw there.
It's an incredible tool, right? We were able to put all our infrastructure in one place. We were able to clearly see what the utilization looked like, what are the applications being deployed, and later on, we were able to do an assessment if we were to move this to VMC on AWS public cloud, how much cost saving we'll be able to do. So in really one dashboard, we were able to get all that information that we were needed in that discovery phase. And this is critical now going forward when we were to do the planning for the migration, because we can plan how do we want to do the migration. Do we want to do in waves? Do we want to do a whole data center migration at once? And what would the resources going to look like, what the security and the networking will look like. Now we have a good understanding of the current infrastructure to plan that better for the migration.
Yeah, I feel like somewhere out there I could actually hear industry voices in those early stages of M&A saying, "I want that. I want you to go use VMware's ARIA Hub in order to tell me what's going on at the target company, as well as probably at the parent company, because it's a complex multi-cloud environment." So that looked like it is a fantastic tool to help support that discovery phase. All right, but the discovery is just one step. We've got the next step. Before we roll the next demo, is there any other lead-in you'd like to share?
Now we're moving into planning and really setup phase. So we have our multiple sites. What we want to do is connect them, build the network plumbing between them so we can later on start the migration journey. So that's what we're going to see in the next demo.
Awesome. All right, let's see how that network is created. Go ahead.
From VMC Cloud Services Console, we can launch HCX Plus service. This service is registered to your VMC org and can see all your deployed VMC SDDCs in that org. Onboarding the SDDC is super easy and can be done with a click of a button. This process automatically deploys and configures all HCX appliances in that SDDC. In this demo environment, I have pre-onboarded a few more on-prem sites. Next, we'll connect a couple of them. Let's say our target company's on-prem with VMC on AWS SDDC that we just onboarded. This site pair is as simple as picking the site and their network. This process will automatically create a bidirectional network between both sites, a secure IPsec tunnel that can be leveraged for workload mobility and migration. We also have an option to create an optional network extension, which creates a stretched L2 extension between sites and enable migrated workload to connect with both sites and continue to work without changing the IP address. HCX Plus is a fully VMware managed workload mobility and migration SaaS platform. It doesn't require any workload agents for the migrations and provides multiple migration types like no downtime live vMotion, replicated assisted migration, bulk migration, and others to fit your migration needs.
So that was really that first step, right? So we've done all the discovery, even done planning, and now it's a setup phase to establish that network connection between the parent company and the target company.
Yeah, and it's very important, right? Because you can imagine a new company coming in, they might have networks that have same IP ranges as the current company because it was built not in mind for migration, right? But our software, our solution solved those problems. You could have same IP ranges, but we'll still be able to migrate. You might obviously have different SSOs and governance tools, but our solutions help with those kind of scenarios. So very practical scenario as you get into the weed of migrating or merging two companies together.
Mm-hmm. And again, I'm thinking about going back to that time to value, right? The concept of we need to bridge our networks, right? Or again, the phone rings and it says to IT, hey, we need to get these networks connected and bridged properly and begin, the setup process. That can be like, oh my God, how am I going to do that? But again, VMware making it look easy in terms of just a couple of clicks and that network is created.
Yep. And as it showed in the demo, it's a L2 extension, means you don't have to change the IPs, which many times are hardwired, hard-coded in the applications. So you'll get the continuous connectivity and, the applications continue to work as you're doing the migration.
Yep. Okay. Network is connected. And now the last thing is, and again, this could be the scenario of, well, we can achieve a cost saving by migrating these different applications, or maybe there's additional security that they wanted to put by running those inside of their data center. Probably the most simple one is just, yes, we're consolidating data centers. We don't need two data centers or two sets of managed host providers. Let's go ahead and consolidate infrastructure and save some money. So now we're going to watch the pushing of the button, right, to move these workloads, I think, is the next demo. So let's go ahead and roll that one.
From VMware HCX Plus SaaS platform, we can see and manage all our sites from a single portal. Here we can also see the status of all the networks we created between the sites and their operational statuses. Let's jump into migrating a workload between sites. In this demo, we will live vMotion a virtual machine, so without any downtime, from on-premises data center to a VMC on AWS SDDC, which is VMware Managed Public Cloud. This process is very simple, as you can cherry pick the virtual machines you would like to migrate, or migrate the entire applications suggested by ARIA migration, or migrate all the corresponding virtual machines of the entire network or storage. HCX Plus support both vSphere networks or NSX overlay networks from source side. On target side, you have the flexibility to pick the target compute, network, and storage. HCX Plus platform provides a lot of other optional flexibility, from upgrading the VM tools while migrating the virtual machines, or running the custom script in the operating system pre and post migration. all these capabilities without installing any agent on the workloads or causing any disruption to the business. As you can retain the MAC address, IP address, and security tags for a continuous security posture on your workloads. In this demo video, I have fast-forwarded the migration process as the virtual machine was replicating on the target side, but we can see the migration was successful and can also see the step-by-step migration details in the event logs.
So migration is something that we've been doing for years, right? vMotioning workloads to different, whether it be different data centers or different locations. Now, of course, VMware's focus on the multi-cloud and being able to abstract infrastructure, provide infrastructure capabilities in different native cloud environments. And right there, we're seeing the ability to move workloads to, essentially wherever you want. Could be on-prem, could be a private cloud, could be a sovereign cloud. That's huge when it comes to that. Back to that original question, and maybe I'll ask this, Puneet, how fast can you get my infrastructure consolidated after day one? Maybe, how would you answer that?
So the planning phase is usually the phase that takes the longest time because you want to do it right. Clicking a button and migrating, that's super easy and fast. We had one of the customers who were in a bad situation recently, and they had to evacuate the data center because of the geopolitical issues. They were able to do that within 48 hours, the whole data center to VMC on AWS. So, these are very mature technology. As you said, we've been doing this for a very long time. And now these are also SaaS technology. So very less overhead on consumer or customer side, easy lifecycle management, and just overall very easy to operate and use.
Yeah, huge. So the big part there, and we spent a good amount of time looking at that planning process, because as you said, that's probably the toughest process, figuring out what do you have, then what do you do with it, and how do you, then of course the move is actually just the press the button, so to speak, to initiate to execute, right? Awesome.
Absolutely.
Well, let's go ahead and bring back Jack now, because we're going to take the last few minutes of the show to cover some Q&A, and we're going to welcome Dan to the show. Dan was helped with the Q&A on episode number 1, so you may recall. And then now he's going to surface some of the questions that have come up in this episode.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Pleasure to be back. So in the remaining few minutes, I'll just pick a few questions. Thanks, everybody in the audience, for interacting in the LinkedIn comments. Appreciate all of those that have come through. So, Jack, why don't we go back to you for the first question here? They want to know, how does Workspace ONE work for the custom apps we built in-house? And they note that they have apps in their data center and Azure.
Yeah, well, the short answer is that, in the app catalog, all of that can be surfaced in the app catalog. And as a matter of fact, one of the components that powers the single sign-on and that app catalog and some other parts of that intelligent hub experience that you saw is Workspace ONE Access. And that's our identity broker. And of course, it's not replacing your IDP, it's working in conjunction with your IDP and all the visibility we have into the endpoints. But the great thing about that is we can put that IDP in front of multiple directories, so you can have consistent access, from one pane of glass for apps that are in multiple locations, multi-cloud, multiple data centers, even as you're bringing the organizations together. So we can definitely support that.
Okay, great. Thanks for that, Jack. So the next one, I chose one for each of you, Jack and Puneet, given the time that we have left. So the next question for you, Puneet, and I'm going to paraphrase this one a little bit because it was a little long. But essentially, what can somebody do with really business critical apps that can't have downtime? This person is explaining that they have these apps kind of stuck in some aging infrastructure and they want to get them to a cloud environment. So how reliable basically is this migration technology? And can we get apps to the cloud without downtime?
Yeah. And Alexander, we touched a little bit. We've been doing vMotion for a very long time. And, we really enhanced that technology to bring into our solution to make it even more robust. These are, we have thousands of customers who have used these, and millions of virtual machines has been migrated using VMware technology. So very robust, and downtime is a very important question for a lot of customers. They want to make sure that everything goes smoothly without disruption to the businesses, and that's where the underlying networking that we do really helps, because you have a stretch L2. You don't have to change IP addresses. You build overlay on the other side in order to keep that network going and virtual machine or applications running, and that helps with no downtime, and it's really robust technology.
Okay,
awesome.
Great. Yeah, we have been doing this for a long time. Thank you, guys. I'll turn it back to you, Alexander.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I know, and we are running a little bit over, so we only had time for one question each. But Puneet and Jack, I wanted to thank you both very much for coming on the show, for sharing those capabilities that help us realize that faster time to value. And then I want to keep Dan around for a minute. So Puneet and Jack, we'll see you later. Dan is actually producing a lot of the information for this show, which is around mergers and acquisitions and how those get tackled in the multi-cloud, as well as, what capabilities can help some of those fundamental things that Joost described. So maybe, Dan, this is a quick opportunity for you to plug some of the material you're working on, as well as what we're going to see in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So, love this opportunity to speak to our audience kind of for the first time about the challenges of M&A from an IT integration perspective. We talked about how to get employees productive faster, consolidating infrastructure, but that's not it, right? Joost talked about several other areas, and we're working on a set of best practices for IT leaders and practitioners to follow during M&A events. And so look out for more information on things like consistent security when you bring in a new company, what to do with networks, wide area networks that you're bringing together from both a cost and access and security perspective there on its own. And then how to get developers that you acquire. Let's say you're a software company or have a software development part of your business, how to get the developers you acquire on the same page and working on the same platforms as your current developers so that they can ship new applications faster and continue on the innovation that you intended in that investment thesis that we talked about in the beginning of the episode. So look out for a series of blogs on the multi-cloud blog, the VMware multi-cloud blog, and a white paper coming up and a session at VMware Explore Las Vegas. So more to come on this topic.
Yeah, I'm super excited about it because this has been a great episode with lots of information. Security, a super important topic. So look forward to hearing more about that also. Thanks, Dan. And hopefully we'll see you on a future show.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, that brings us to the end of our show. Now it's time for a quick show recap. So first and foremost, of course, wanted to thank Joost for coming on and giving us the industry perspective from Deloitte, talking about that, beginning with always keeping in mind that investment thesis. Why was the deal done, right? What was the real reason for it? And not get all of a sudden distracted right in the forest, always keeping that at the very, top. Then how that translates to where IT rolls in. And then from there, all the capabilities that VMware brings that can support that faster time to value for the investment thesis, beginning with day zero. It's been announced. Now let's get the integration teams going with the information they need with VDI capabilities. Then looking at now it's a real deal. Day one. Now we need to get those employees onboarded again as fast as possible to realize that investment thesis and make the merger successful. On the other side, right? So end user computing, we also covered all the infrastructure and saying from an infrastructure standpoint, then how do we look at number one, discovery, then planning and setup, and finally execution. So fantastic episode, lots of information. We will be reposting this you can watch it here, the replay on LinkedIn, as well as it will go on YouTube with additional show notes. What's coming up next? All right. In a month, we'll be talking about modernizing your data center for the multi-cloud. So that's going to be airing on June 28th. We'll share more information on our blog about the guest speakers, as well as the demonstrations that will be included in that episode. It'll be episode number 6. Then if you missed any of the prior episodes, you can hit that QR code and you'll see a page that summarizes all of them and gives you links to all the replays. And then as Dan just mentioned, right? Lots more information coming out about guidance on mergers and acquisitions and what capabilities VMware has that can help you deliver faster time to value and what's being asked of you as an IT department in order to realize that investment thesis. So with that, I hope you enjoyed the show. By all means, you're welcome to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Big shout out to all the people behind the scenes that help arrange the speakers as well as produce this episode. So thank you all very much and look forward to seeing you again in a month. Take care.